Welcome to episode 6, part 1 of it. It's not a Meisner podcast. I am, as always, Kevin Kiffel.
And I am as
here
always.
with my.
Oh, you say.
I was going to say your name, but you go ahead.
Well, I don't always remember my name, but it's Carson S. Davis.
Yeah. Carson S. Davis.
Oh.
Carson. You know, it occurs to me that you have a very cruel name.
Cruel?
Your name is cruel for me because I'm sure that our regular listeners, I think there's about 14 of them.
Right.
By now, they must have picked up that I have a lisp. I have a terrible S. I can't say S. Oh, you put an S right in the middle of your fucking...
Well, in Carson and in Davis.
Yeah. So it would be bad enough if you had a middle initial S, and it makes me say it. You have 3 S's now that you call my attention to it. Every part of your name is an S in it.
I think my mother did that as a stark gesture of hostility towards her child's future acting teacher.
Well,
I think it was purposeful.
Well, I take offense. Hey, Carson, I'm triggered by that. I feel very triggered. Carson S. Davis.
I'll change.
I'm gonna get a different host. Maybe that's what I'll do. Different call.
Oh, yeah.
Or change your name. Was that what you were gonna say? Change your name?
I'll just change my name to Bunny.
I was gonna say, let's call Bunny. Let's come up with a name that has no S's in it. I think your name should be Jedediah Hugh Willoughby.
That's easier.
Jedediah Willoughby. That's your new name. There's not a damn S anywhere in that name.
No, there's not.
The only problem is you sound like you come from the 1800s.
Well, yeah, that's an issue. I don't know if that guy runs a podcast.
And here comes old Jedediah Willoughby. Hey, what are you going to do today, Jedediah? I thought I'd do my podcast. It doesn't quite line up.
No. Dramaturgically, it's a dramaturgical error.
Yeah. That's right. All right. Anyway, speaking of our podcast, here we go. Today is the day, blessedly, we actually start to address Sanford Meisner's extraordinary technique. His life's work of how to help an actor be deeply, deeply present on stage, among other things.
Yeah, it only took us nine episodes.
It took us 9 episodes to be like, oh, yeah, that's right. We wanted to talk about Meisner, remember? So our episode today will begin where the Meisner technique begins, which is with the repetition exercise. So we will discuss that as soon as we come back from our intro. It should not be acting training. It should be actor training.
Am I a good actor?
Like me doing... It's not a Meisner podcast.
There it is.
Repetition. Here's the thing that, first and foremost, we would like to address. Most people who do not know or do not understand the Meisner technique, they'll say, oh, that's repetition. Or as if the only exercise in the Meisner technique is the repetition exercise. But in truth, the repetition exercise just begins the whole thing, right? If you remember a few episodes ago, Carson said to me that he remembered that I told him once that some people would say to me that they did a little bit of Meisner. And I used to say, you can't do a little bit of Meisner. If you start doing in our world, if you start doing repetition, it ends 2 years later.
Right.
Right? You start with repetition, and every time you habitualize an aspect of the technique, we introduce the next aspect. We don't jump all over the place. We don't stop at any one thing. We introduce the next part of the sequence. And by doing that, we never let go of the previous thing. We are building upon a thing. So in that sense, the repetition exercise, as my teacher Maggie used to say to us, repetition is just an acorn that gets planted, out of which grows a mighty oak tree. If you start with repetition and you stay with it, and you keep adding the next elements that Meisner created, it will develop into an extremely sophisticated improvisation. Now, improvisation is a word that we will also address in this episode and further, right? I think a lot of people misunderstand improvisation, so we will talk about it as we go. Okay, so we can't really begin talking about repetition specifically and the Meisner technique in general without first talking about baseball. Right, Carson?
Yeah. We examine Meisner through the lens of baseball and Seinfeld. That's kind of what.
Yep. Baseball, if you really want to learn about acting, you have to watch Bull Durham.
Yeah.
The movie about acting. Now, why should you watch Bull Durham to learn about acting? Because the actors in it are so great? They are, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you must watch Bull Durham because the acting is great. Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins and Kevin Costner. They are very good in it, but I'm not telling you to watch it to observe their acting. I'm telling you to watch it because everything Kevin Costner's character, he plays an old catcher, everything he tells the young pitcher is a lesson in acting, right? And so for us, or for me anyway, the lesson, this particular baseball lesson, addresses the repetition exercise. I'm a lifelong Yankee fan. And in the 90s and early 2000s, they had a player named Paul O'Neill, who was a great hitter. And
He was on Seinfeld.
He actually was. Well, now the two worlds have all come together, haven't they? He was so obsessed with hitting, so into it. And you would catch him out in right field practicing his batting stance. He was supposed to be on defense. He was supposed to be in the outfield, but instead he would be practicing the other side of his art, which was hitting. You'd see him practicing his hitting stance. So many hitters are focused on the fundamentals of what they do, which is hit. But that's not who I want to talk about. I want to talk about Hank Aaron. Henry Aaron, who by all metrics, one of the greatest hitters ever in baseball. He didn't focus on his own batting technique. He focused on the pitcher that he was going to face. So while most baseball players were practicing their hitting swing and their stance, he was in his hotel room the night before studying the pitcher he was going to face the next day. Because anybody who knows baseball knows if you play in a series, let's say you play 3 or 4 games in a row, every game there's a different pitcher. Who cares how you bat? It's against a person who's throwing the ball. You have to go to school on how they release the ball, how they throw it, what pitches they throw. So Hank Aaron, one of the greatest batters in the world, didn't really focus on his hitting. He focused on who was throwing him the ball. And he used to do this thing in the dugout. He would take his cap off. And those of you who know, a baseball cap has a little hole in the top. It's for air, it's for to breathe a little bit. A little hole. He would take the cap off and hold it over his face in the dugout. And his player, his teammates would think he was nuts. They're like, what is this guy doing? The game is on and he's got his hat over his face. He was looking through the little hole in the top of his hat at the pitcher. So he created a little aperture. He basically created a circle of attention. He created an aperture that blacked out everything that he could see except the pitcher. That's how zeroed in he was on the pitcher. And he would watch the pitcher through this little hole in the top of his hat, and he would go to school on the pitcher's release point, their windup, all this stuff.
Wow.
Okay. So what's he doing? He's making the game of baseball not about himself, but about the other guy.
Mm.
And that's what repetition is. It begins the process of, my teacher Maggie, again, used to say, the actor's mantra is, I am here to be done to. So for all of you young actors listening, you must show up to your work as an empty vessel. You must empty out everything you are, everything you think you are. And you say to yourself, I am an empty vessel here to be filled up by the experience of my partner. Right? So you start at what we call perfect zero. I am at perfect zero. I'm not too much of a thing, but I'm also not too little of a thing. I'm at that perfect place where I'm an empty vessel. And when I let my partner in and I let them happen to me, I fill up from the experience of my partner. Okay? The repetition exercise asks you to stand across from another person, maybe 6 or 8 feet apart, not too far apart, not too close either, and leave yourself alone if you can. Put yourself in that place where there is nothing that is your concern except your experience of that person. Okay. Now, this brings us to the principle of acting. In our very first episode, those of you listening, I'm assuming that you're listening in order. The first episode, we talked about the definition of acting, and we really took it apart, right? And what we wound up with was Meisner's definition of acting with a little Bill Esper sprinkled in, right? Acting is the ability to do truthfully under imaginary circumstances, raised to the optics of the theater, right? So what we were saying is, you have to have this ability to enter the reality of doing. You should always be doing. You're never not doing on stage. Even if you're just sitting there, you're doing something internally maybe. Always be doing, but do it simply and truthfully. But the circumstances that you're doing it in are imaginary. It's not real, right? And then that last part we said was, yes, you're being truthful and simple, but you also have to allow for the space you're doing that in. Sometimes you have to fill a large theater, sometimes you're on camera, etc., right? The definition of acting. But there is also a principle of acting. And, if you want to go this route, principles are scientific, It's kind of scientific if you want to think of it that way. It's Newton's third law of whatever the hell Newton talked about. What is it? His third law of gravity? Some fucking thing. I'm not talking about Isaac Newton. I'm talking about Steve Newton. Do you remember Steve? He was a good guy.
Steve Newton.
Good old Stevie Newton. No, it is, in fact, sort of a scientific principle, right? It follows that principle of that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? And so what we say is, for actors, they say, I don't do anything unless my partner does something that causes me to do it. The other way we look at it is, you don't self-generate anything. Nothing comes from within yourself as far as an invention goes. Why did you do that? I thought it would be interesting. I just had an idea. Okay. Never self-generate on stage. Everything you do is a response to or a reaction to the sensual environment. 95% of the time, it's your partner, right? Meisner said, and this is very important, acting does not take place in a vacuum. You're not just standing there with nothing around you. Acting does not take place in a vacuum. There's always something on the other end of the energy you send out, and most importantly, the energy you then take back in. It's cyclical, okay? So the principle of acting is I don't do anything unless my partner does something that causes me to do it, all right? David Mamet has a great pithy version of that. On stage, invent nothing, deny nothing. That's sort of it too. You do not go on and don't go on stage and invent anything. However, don't deny what is going on. Invent nothing, deny nothing. Okay. The way we have whittled it down, because actors, it's always good for actors to distill, to understand the essence of everything. So we hope to do that in our podcast. Like everything we talk about, ultimately, we hope we can help the actor listening at home to whittle it down to its essence. And the way we actors say the principle of acting, we say, pinch, ouch. And that's the principle of acting. If somebody pinches you, you say, ouch. Obviously, right?
That's
but let's take that
equal and
Go ahead.
opposite. That's the equal and opposite reaction that you're talking.
If there are no other factors,
Right.
okay? Because we have to allow for, this is for when it's you with your partner
Right.
have doing an actor's workout. That's all. There are no other factors. You and your partner, meaning equal and opposite. If you're in a play, your character gets pinched, they might say ouch differently, but that's because they have a whole world up to that point. Maybe they had a bad day and somebody just bumps into them a little bit and they fly off the handle. That ain't equal.
Well, we would call that accumulation, right?
Your accumulation, and you're out of adjustment, but they don't know that. They don't know you had a bad day.
Right.
Right. So what I'm doing now is making sure that our listeners understand that when we say the repetition exercise, you're not a character. You're not repeating as a character. You are you standing across from your partner, and what you're doing is getting a great workout in giving yourself permission to have your partner happen to you, to let them in and let them happen to you. You drop that armor that you built up, right? So this pinch ouch, it sort of has three components to it, right? You don't say pinch before, you don't say ouch before you're pinched. You say ouch when you're pinched, right? Why would you say, Carson, why would you say ouch before you're pinched?
Because then you're not truly taking in or you're responding in the moment.
You're not responding. You're anticipating.
Right.
You're not in the moment, and you're not truly taking in.
You're self-generating.
You generated an ouch, but nobody pinched you.
Right.
But why would you do that in a play? Why would you say ouch before you're pinched?
Well,
in a play.
There's a multitude of answers to that, right? Because there's multiple scenarios. But one is what we just said. There's also one where you're manipulating the character is manipulating the scene partner, right? Like that's a tactic to achieve something.
It may be a tactic.
Yeah,
but what we're saying is, if you're purely the actor,
right,
then you're not listening and you're anticipating.
Right.
And why would you anticipate? Because the lines have been memorized. And if you're that actor that's up there going, I'm just waiting for them to stop talking and then I say my line, You're saying your lines before you're pinched to say them.
Yeah.
You're ahead of the pinch. You go, ouch. I know my line. Like, yeah, but no one pinched you. Okay.
Well,
So go ahead.
that just goes back to what you've talked about you memorize lines to forget them.
Absolutely.
So that you do have the ability to listen and respond, pinch and ouch in the moment when it happens. And frankly, that's a whole lot easier than having to self-generate anything.
Isn't that crazy?
Like,
It's easier, but it's scarier.
yeah. But it
It's
is the path of least resistance,
The
honestly.
path of least resistance is to, how about you just say fuck it and
Yeah.
leave everything alone and let your partner actually happen to you, and trust that when you get pinched, you will say ouch in the form of the lines you memorized.
Mhm.
And I love that, Carson. It's the path of least resistance. Imagine being up there freaking out with anxiety about your lines.
Yeah.
What do I say and when do I say them? Now, the other thing is that you could say ouch 10 seconds after you were pinched. Why would you do that in a play, Carson?
Well, because you're not truly taking in the present moment, or you're caught in your head thinking.
You're caught in your head.
Or-
You're off the impulse.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. You're off the impulse. You're not in the present moment. So they do something that pinches you, but because you weren't being soft and open and sensual, it didn't land on you. And then 10 seconds later, you go, ouch. You said your line 10 seconds later, right? Another reason you may delay your ouch is because you don't want to be vulnerable and admit that the pinch hurt, that you got pinched. You say ouch right in the moment, right? Sandy Meisner said, the truth of you lies in your spontaneous response. That is one of the greatest, simplest observations. Nobody could argue it. The truth of you lies in your spontaneous response. So if I snuck up behind you, Carson, and pinched you, you would go, oh, ow, like right in the moment, ouch. And that's truly who you are. You didn't have time to consider it. You didn't have time to withhold. If I pinched you really hard and it hurt, you certainly could deny that. You could push it down, pretend it didn't hurt, and then later go, ouch, meaning that didn't hurt, but it did, right? Now, again, we have to be clear. You could be playing a character who does do that. I don't want you to see you hurt me. So I hold on and I say ouch differently than how you pinched me, right? But the repetition exercise, you're not a character, you're you. And it's a workout in leaving yourself alone and allowing the truth of you to come from your spontaneous response.
Yeah.
You know?
It reminds me of this, the late, great Gina Rowlands.
Oh,
Recently just passed. She had this quote that I'm going to paraphrase, but it went something like, everyone has all of humanity within them, right?
yes.
But the level of artist or actor that you are is the degree to which you can reveal that humanity.
Absolutely.
You know? So,
Absolutely.
and that's what repetition serves. It's you.
It's you. By the way, a lot of actors have trouble with repetition at first. They always say to me, just give me a character. They don't want to be, they're like, I don't want to reveal what I am personally actually going through up here. And I would always say to them, well, there probably are techniques where you can be a character. But in this one, you learn who you are so you can lend that to the character that you're going to play.
Right.
Because
I
perfect
don't understand
zero.
how you could understand. If you haven't explored your own self, how could you understand someone who's extremely far from you, you know?
Unless you pretend.
Right.
Unless you make it up and pretend, but we don't want that.
Yeah.
So I remember once, Carson, I don't know if I ever told you this, I was watching a, like a hidden video kind of thing. They caught it on video. I love those shows where you see people's truthful behavior when they don't know they're being filmed, but you go, right? These three guys, I mean, really tough guys with neck tattoos and all the shit, like really tough guys, big tough guys walking through a haunted house. And all of a sudden this thing jumped out and the one guy screamed like a 5-year-old girl. He went, "Ah!" His fingers like waggled in front of his mouth. And his two friends looked at him like, what the fuck? It's like, dude, you will forever be the guy who looks like a tough biker guy with tattoos, but you're the guy who, when something jumped out at you, you screamed like a 5-year-old girl in a little dress, you know? And his buddies would not let him live it down. But the truth of you, that's who he was in that moment.
Yeah.
Right? So, Antonin Artaud said there's no defense for a surprise.
Yeah.
There's no defense for a surprise. I think partly that's, partly why Meisner put a door in the exercise, right?
Right.
We'll get to this later. Those of you at home who are intrigued by this technique but have never done it, he put a door, I think, purposely in the exercise because you don't know what's on the other end of it, and it gives you something to respond to. All right. So again, what we're saying here, bottom line, and we have used this term before, that acting at its most basic is listening and responding. Listening and responding. Now, I will add something to that. Acting is listening and responding with a point of view, right? And when we get working on repetition, that's when we start to identify it's not just that you're responding, but you're responding with your personal point of view. Okay? We will get to it. We will get to it. So back to the repetition exercise. And by the way, this is episode 6, part 1, where Carson and I will take apart the repetition exercise, talk about it in theory, talk about it in practice, but not put it into practice. Episode 6, part 2, we will invite 2 actors to come in and demonstrate repetition, and we will record it, and we will make sure that it goes out there in a visual medium so people can actually watch. When 2 actors do repetition, you can see the nuance and the subtlety of how they are transitioning based on how they're being treated.
Right.
So another thing that repetition has a lot of excellent quality reasons for doing it, let's say, right? It covers a lot of ground. Really does a lot. Such a simple exercise, but brilliant. It does a number of things, and we'll address all of them. One of the main things it does is it kind of makes you put all of your attention on your partner, right? It makes you put all of your attention on your partner. And if that's the case, then there's no leftover attention for you to be self-conscious. You can't be self-conscious. You can't be thinking about yourself and how you look or how you're doing. You're putting all of your attention on your partner, because if you're going to respond to them, then you need to make them more important than you up there. Right? And by the way, when we say your partner's more important than you, we're not going outside of the acting. We don't mean, well, they're a very important person and you're a piece of shit. We're not saying that. We're saying it's valuable to you to make your partner important, because if they're important, that means that they can happen to you. They mean enough to you to get under your skin, to happen to you, right? But the only way to do that is to put all of your attention on them, right? Self-consciousness is the enemy of the actor. If you have the tiniest little bit of awareness of yourself and how you're working, you will instantly extrapolate it. I'm in a play. Next thing you know, you look up, you go, oh shit, there are lights lighting me in a way that's not my living room. And then the next extrapolation is there's a bunch of people watching me. Right? So you put 100% of your attention on your physical, your sensual environment. You will get lost in the world of that environment, in the imaginary world. All right. So it's good practice in getting your attention off yourself.
Mm.
The other thing it does, it gets you on the impulse and it keeps you there. It holds you there. Right? You will all understand this once we talk about repetition and how it works. I'm putting the cart before the horse a little bit. You get on the impulse. And what it does is it addresses our upbringing for the most part in America, in the Western world. Children are told to crush their impulses almost from the second they can have impulses, you know? I mean, when a baby cries, they go, shh, shh. They pat it on the back and shush it. Like the baby's like, oh, it's just crying for no damn reason. I'll stop because you told me to, you know?
You mentioned this in a previous episode, I think, about like what hot is. Like you obviously don't want a child to get injured, of course, but you do want them to learn like why the plate is hot and it would hurt you to know.
Yeah, but then that extends to things like all of these aphorisms that we have. Look before you leap. Think before you speak.
I think Neil deGrasse Tyson actually talked about this one time where he said he always gets frustrated when he sees a parent not let the kid jump in a puddle or something. Because then he like broke down all the reasons that everything you would learn from jumping in a puddle, which I find kind of charming, but it's true.
It's true. All the science that you learn from it, you know, as well as socialized things sometimes.
Yeah.
And the bottom line, the freedom of it.
Yeah.
The freedom of just launching yourself into a puddle, you know. But it's all exploration, isn't it? Why would you jump in a puddle? To watch the water go flying all over the place.
Yeah.
You know? All of those, you know, how many of those nursery rhymes and Brothers Grimm stories and all, they're all about like, don't explore anything. Always stay in the middle, you know? Hey, what about, do you remember Chris Rock? When Chris Rock had that bit?
Right.
We used to go out and play. And then you came home and the street light went on. But then parameters started coming in. You can only go to the end of the block and back. No, you're only allowed to go to that stupid back. And then pretty soon kids will be playing. They'll just have one foot in place and they'll just be spinning around in a circle. And that'll be their play, spinning in a circle with one foot on the, don't move your other foot, you know? Well, then you get to be an adult and you want to be an actor and you start doing the Meisner repetition exercise. I had a guy say this to me once: fire, aim, ready.
That's great.
Right? That old, the command, the sergeant or whatever gives the command: ready, aim, fire.
Yeah.
That means first you have to get ready. And then you aim. Then you fire the gun, you know? But what about fire, aim, ready? Imagine you already fired. And then they go aim. You go, oh, I was supposed to aim? I already fired.
Oh, we say that in Meisner acting class, you know, you use your impulse and clean up the mess later kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Just act on your impulse and then deal with it.
Leap before you look.
Yeah.
You know, here comes periodically, I pull out my grandpa routine. When I was your age, Carson. But I came up in the 60s, right? The 70s. And we had a song that kind of encapsulated some of what we were about. That song, Born to Be Wild.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the lines is, fire all of your guns at once. Oh, shit. Fire all of your guns at once. You go, wait, shouldn't I hold on to some of it? No. Wow. But that could be, once we do that, we're out of ammo. We could be in trouble. That is correct.
Yeah.
You might be in trouble. Okay. So the other thing that the repetition exercise does, it does what my colleague Barbara Marchant would say, tune up your hearing. Tune up your hearing. Meaning, I know what they literally said, but what did they say to you? Couldn't you tell they were saying something to you, even though they weren't literally saying it? Tune up your hearing. Barbara also used to say to her students, actors are like icebergs. You're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. And the actor lives, most of it's below the surface. And actors are like icebergs. They're very, very full under the surface. Repetition kind of draws to the surface that thing that's normally under the water.
Right.
And no one sees it. Okay? Oscar Wilde has a great quote. Theater is at once, art is at once both surface and symbol. Those who dare to go below the surface do so at their own peril.
That's great.
You could stay on the surface, but if you choose to go below the surface, you may dig up some stuff. You may find some stuff. But that's what art is.
Right.
And why it exists, partly. Okay. Now, the other thing in that category is what happens sometimes, this, Carson, we'll be working with young actors in repetition, and they may stop and go, nothing's happening. Or worse, this is the worst thing that you could say, my partner isn't giving me anything. Oh, it's your partner's fault, is it? Oh, it's your partner. You're going to throw them under the bus, huh? But Sandy Meisner used to say, there's no such thing as nothing. There's no such thing as nothing. If you say nothing's happening, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Right? We phrase it, we spin that and phrase it in a positive way. We say everything is something.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is something. Something's going on. So what is the repetition exercise? It begins standing across from your partner. And in the very, very early part of it, you make an observation. It's observational. It keeps it simple. And man, does it take the emphasis off of you. Yeah. You make an observation about your partner. You're all listening to this. Maybe it'll be visual someday. Maybe there'll be a video of this and you'll see it. But you don't need to. I'll describe it. Carson's wearing glasses. And I might just say, you're wearing glasses. It's the simplest observation in the world. Now, in the early version of this, you may literally say back to me what I said. Every word. Right? So, Carson, if I say, you're wearing glasses, you would say,
you're wearing glasses.
Right. You're wearing glasses.
You're wearing glasses.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't matter what we're saying. The only thing that matters is we had a first moment, an impulse. From that point on, it is not about whether or not Carson is wearing glasses. In fact, there already was a little difference. The second time I said, you're wearing glasses, he went, you're wearing glasses. Like there was already a little bit of a, Carson was going through a little something differently when I first said it. Okay. You can do that version where you literally repeat every word. And why is that good? Because it demonstrates it doesn't matter what you say after the first time. When I say you're wearing glasses, that does matter because it's my observation of you. But once you say it back to me, all bets are off. It's not about what we're saying. It's about how we're experiencing each other. Okay? So, why is this important? Repeating the same thing. It takes the onus, the responsibility off of the actor to have to come up with dialogue. Right? When Meisner watched actors work, he was thinking they're playing the text. They think the most important thing is the dialogue. And then today, in modern times, I recognize that actors are terrible improvisers. They're not good at it. And the reason is they try to make up dialogue. They think improvising is making up interesting, compelling dialogue. So when they improvise, what they're really doing is playwriting on their feet. But I'm not training you to be a playwright. And I'm sure as fuck not training you to be a bad playwright, where you kind of manipulate it into this horrible freaking melodramatic bullshit that isn't true to the moment at all. So what happens if you go, don't worry about the dialogue. You're wearing glasses. I'm wearing glasses. I don't have to worry about what to say next. Just repeat. Just repeat. Okay? Now, the next aspect of this is to change the pronoun, because the purpose of repetition is to be speaking the truth in the present moment. So if I said, Carson, you're wearing a gray shirt, say it back to me. You're wearing a gray shirt.
I'm wearing a gray shirt.
He changed the pronoun, right? Because if I said you're wearing a gray shirt, Carson, say that back to me literally.
You're wearing a gray shirt.
The problem is, listeners at home, I'm wearing a green shirt. So if I say, Carson, you're wearing, by the way, if I said, Carson, you're wearing glasses, and he said, you're wearing glasses, I am. So we are telling the truth. We're just going back and forth saying we're both wearing glasses. But when we get to this next level and I go, you're wearing a gray shirt, and he says, I'm wearing a gray shirt, he changed the pronoun. Why? Because that's the truth of what's being spoken. Here's what's being spoken. Carson's wearing a gray shirt. I said, you're wearing a gray shirt, and he is saying what I said.
Right.
I'm wearing a gray shirt. Okay? Observational. It starts out observational. We are not trying to make anything happen. We are simply present. But if I say you're wearing a gray shirt, and he says, I'm wearing a gray shirt, and I say, you're wearing a gray shirt, and he says, I'm wearing a gray shirt, something's going to start happening between us. I may crack a smile, and he'll be like, I'm wearing a gray, you think it's something's funny, right? So it's no longer about whether or not he's wearing a gray shirt. It's about what's happening experientially between us. Okay. Now, this is a wonderful story. I have no idea if it's apocryphal. I hope to God it's true, but it might not be. I'm almost positive that everybody's got some story they heard of how Meisner came up with or stumbled upon the repetition exercise. The one that I heard and I like is that he came into work one day, at the neighborhood playhouse or something in the morning, and somebody said to him, how you feeling today, Sandy? That's the kind of thing you just say to someone. How you feeling today? And what do you normally say back? You go, great. Good. Fine. Thank you. Wonderful. Bye. You might as well not even have had that interaction.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean anything. For some reason on this day, somebody said, how you feeling today, Sandy? And he said, how am I feeling today? Like he just said it back. And then for some reason, they said it back again. Yeah, how you feeling today? And he went, how am I feeling today? How are you feeling today? And then they kind of got caught in saying it. But Meisner took it seriously. And eventually he went, I'm a little depressed today. I feel a little depressed. Well, whether that's true or not, that's a hell of a discovery. That if you let yourself live in the experience of the contact that you have with your partner, this back and forth, and you take it seriously, after 4 or 5 or 6 repeats, you go, I just suspended time for a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? I just made one moment. How are you feeling? I made 5 moments out of it. How am I feeling? How am I feeling? How am I feeling? But also I stay with my partner because it's not about how I'm feeling. It's about how they're saying it to me. They keep saying it to me and I'm working off them. So in a weird way, I've extended time. And normally you go, how you feeling today? Great. And you keep going. Imagine if you had the time. How you feeling? How am I feeling? Like you take the opportunity to actually sound it out. And at the end of it, in this version, Meisner told the truth. I'm feeling depressed today. Oh, wow. Yeah. The extrapolation of it would be that other person would then say, you're feeling depressed. I'm feeling depressed. You're feeling depressed. All we're doing now is identifying and claiming that we are in the next moment, the next present, truthful moment. And that's how repetition operates. Unanticipated moment to unanticipated moment. You leave yourself alone, and God bless us, everyone. You don't have to come up with dialogue.
Yeah.
You just say what's being spoken. Okay? Now, this is a simple exercise, but it is not easy because it goes against our indoctrination. It goes against how we were raised and trained to be as adult humans in a society. Because look at it this way. Hey, man, how you doing? Terrible. My dog got cancer and I had to euthanize it. The fuck? What'd you tell me that for? You asked me how I was doing. Nobody Hey, man, how you doing? Great. But you just euthanized your dog that morning.
Right.
You're not great. But they don't want to know. When they say how you doing, they don't want you to tell them.
Yeah, it's like a societal construct.
A societal construct. Sometimes built into it is they want the answer. Hey, everything okay? They want the answer. Yes. Hey, Carson, you good? Everything good? I'm coaching you to just say yes to that. I gave you the answer that I want back.
Right. Yeah.
Now, glory be to Dionysus, we don't have to do that in the acting room. We stand across from another actor who understands that we're here to tell the truth. And we're here to have what we call an actor's workout. You know, you go to the gym to work out. Well, you go to the rehearsal room or the classroom, the art room, the creative room to have a workout. This is a workout in impulsivity. It's a workout in leaving yourself alone and letting your partner happen to you. And ultimately, it's a workout in your temperament, because you can't control how your partner's going to happen to you. And all parts of your temperament, if you're working well, will be pinched, and you'll say ouch to it. You can fall around, you could fall down laughing, giddy like a child. You can get super fucking pissed. You can be incredulous. I cannot fucking believe you're talking to me that way, Carson. It can get playful. It can get flirty. You can be like, this is kind of exciting, flirty in a good and positive and safe way. Goes all over the place. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is we'll wrap this up. I'm going to acknowledge that the repetition doesn't continue with the initial thing spoken. Otherwise, Carson and I would say, you're wearing a gray shirt for an hour.
Right.
The repetition does change. You will find yourself saying something else, but it has to be earned. The change in the repetition is earned. And there are 5 ways that the repetition changes. And what we're going to do at the end of this episode, as in right now, we're going to sort of tease that our next episode will be 2 people doing repetition. And I'm going to tell you what the 5 ways are that the repetition changes, so that next week, when you're watching 2 people do repetition, you can look out for the moment when the actor made a change and what guideline were they following to make that change. So when I give you these 5 changes now, they won't mean a damn thing if you don't know the repetition exercise. If you do know the repetition exercise, you will say, yep, that is correct. And thank you for reminding me of that. Okay. The first way that the repetition changes, we call it the honest answer or the honest response. Always telling the truth. So if you're being honest in your response, you may change the repetition because we're not telling the truth here. The purest version of that is, I say, Carson, you're wearing a green shirt. He changes the pronoun to tell the truth. I'm wearing a gray shirt. If he said, you're wearing a green shirt, he would not be telling the truth, because I'm wearing a green shirt, not a gray shirt. So the simplest, honest answer is changing the pronoun. But sometimes you change the pronoun to tell the truth because your partner might be saying something about you that isn't true. Right? So if Carson and I are working off each other, and eventually I go, you're getting pissed at me. I'm getting pissed at you. You're getting pissed at me. Carson would be, if Carson's not pissed, he'd be like, you don't know what you're talking about. That's the truth.
Yeah.
You're reading me wrong. You don't know me, or whatever. Okay? The honest answer. The second way that the repetition changes is, we call it the piling up of moments. The piling up of moments. That means one moment that comes right after the next, that comes right after the next. It's not apropos of nothing that you're saying the same thing over and over and over again. That in and of itself is an experience. You're wearing a gray shirt. I'm wearing a gray shirt. You're wearing a gray shirt. I'm wearing a gray shirt. You're wearing a gray shirt. I'm wearing a gray shirt. We keep saying the same thing. Those moments are piling up. So you might change the repetition just from the sheer experience of what it means to say the same thing over and over. You might crack up laughing because we just keep saying something about your damn gray shirt. Okay, already. I'm wearing a gray shirt. My God, you're driving me nuts. You changed the repetition. Why? Because we kept saying the same thing over and over. That's a piling up of moments. Okay? Listen, when all else fails, second way the repetition changes, piling up, that's always happening. Right? Let's go to the name of our podcast, right? It's not happening.
Right.
We keep saying the same thing. We're not doing that. It is a thing. Everything is something. Okay. The third and the fourth ways that the repetition changes, I have never had a teacher say this to me, but I feel this myself, that they work hand in hand, that it's like two hands in the same glove, it's kind of hard to have one without the other. The third way the repetition changes, we call it the behavioral change. You may recognize something in your partner's behavior, and you might call it, "You're getting mad at me, Carson. I picked up from his behavior, so I call it," right? I'm no longer saying you're wearing glasses. I'm saying, "Jesus, Carson, you're getting pissed." The fourth way that the repetition changes is what we call the point of view change. I may change the repetition because I have a point of view. Now, I may have a point of view about Carson getting pissed at me. That's why I think the third and the fourth, they kind of work together a little bit. I might have a point of view about Carson's behavior, but I couldn't have that point of view if I didn't pick up on his behavior. Now, I may call his behavior without having a point of view about it, but it's almost inherent. Like if I just go, "Carson, you're getting mad," like a robot, well, then I'm just observing it. But if I'm like, "Jesus Christ, Carson, you're getting pissed," I have a point of view. It's inherent that I'm going, "Boy, are you sensitive," or something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the behavioral change and the point of view change. Okay. Now, listen, this is really important. All of things are happening all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You don't go, "And now for the behavioral change." No. All of these things are happening all the time. You are nothing except connected to your partner. That's all you are. You're in contact with your partner. That's all. Knowing these changes is like everything in our technique. It becomes habitualized and you're doing it without thinking about it. You become unconsciously competent at it. But not at first. At first, you're like, "I'm in my head about the thing that's supposed to be getting me out of my head," like everything else. The fifth way that the repetition changes is the adding up of moments. Not the same as the piling up of moments. The piling up of moments is one moment after the other, after the other, after the other. The adding up of moments is what happens through the course of the entire time you've been in contact. Carson and I are so good at this, we could be in contact for 10 or 15 minutes. There's no reason to stop. If you're working well in repetition, why would it stop? You just keep answering the present moment. There's no reason to stop it. So Carson and I could be in our 15th minute of being in deep and perfectly adjusted contact.
Mm-hmm.
But I could suddenly go, "Carson, you're a jealous asshole." Why would I say that? Because this is the third or fourth time in the 15 minutes that he brought up something that comes from his jealousy, in my opinion. I would not say, "Carson, you're a jealous asshole," in the third or fourth moment.
Right.
I might not even say it in the first time that he demonstrates to me that he's jealous of something. I might have a point of view about it, like, "Oh, I might even laugh at it." But by the third time, if he says something that's in that ballpark, I go, "From the accumulative experience I've been having with you, Carson, you are a jealous asshole." Okay. So, I could go, "You bitch, you fucking bitch." Well, that would be because I go, "I know what this is," after 10 minutes. You're being a bitch to me, right? But my teacher Maggie used to go, 5 moments does not a bitch make.
Mm.
You can't go, "You're wearing a gray shirt. I'm wearing a gray shirt. You're wearing a gray shirt. I'm wearing a gray shirt. You bitch." What? Not after 5 moments. You can't be a bitch. I don't even think you could be a bitch after 20, 30 moments. After 150 moments, maybe you're like, "Oh my God, you fucking bitch." It has to add up. It's cumulative.
Right.
Okay. Good. So we're going to leave it there for today. This was just us addressing the fact that there is an exercise that Sanford Meisner invented and developed through his life's work, among other things. There's so much more to the Meisner technique than repetition, but we are acknowledging that even though we call ourselves not a Meisner podcast, meaning we love to talk about other things, theater in general, other techniques, art, other kinds of art, all of that stuff. But not is a double negative. So if we say it's not Meisner, we're saying it is Meisner.
Right.
We want to talk about the Meisner technique, and we want to help anybody out there to understand and demystify it, for God's sake. Okay? Bottom line out of all of this, in terms of repetition, ultimately, we're training you to be subjective in your response to everything. Even though it starts objective. You're wearing glasses. That's just an objective observation. But I'm not training you to be a reporter. I'm training you to be an artist, an actor. So you're wearing glasses is not enough. That's not an actor's response. I could say you're wearing round glasses. Well, that's a little more particular. But what? If I look at you and go, John Lennon, I immediately have a point of view. John Lennon wore those granny glasses, those round glasses. I go, John Lennon. I don't only say that you're John Lennon or you look like John Lennon. I'm saying I loved that guy and you're reminding me of a wonderful, fun thing. But I also could go, those glasses are ridiculous. First moment, my point of view is Carson. You're not 78 years old, right? Those glasses are for a grandpa. You look ridiculous. That's my first moment. Could be. Okay. So ultimately, we're training you to come from your subjective self, not your object. We don't care about you observing things. We care about you having a point of view about everything you observe.
Yeah.
Right. It's about feeling, not thinking. Okay. Cool. Anything else, Carson, before we sign off?
I think just that the reason there's so many different, I guess, variants or manipulations of repetition out there. And I think that the reason that is because that's the thing that's kind of been shipped out to the world of what Meisner is, because it is one exercise that speaks to so many things, right? So that's its benefit, but the detriment is that it has been taken out of context here and there. But only because it's so good, because it works on point of view, because it works on moment to moment, because it works on circle of attention. All of it builds to your ability to be in front of a camera or on the stage, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a great way of looking at it, because it addresses so many things that might, as Declan Donovan would say, things that block the actor.
Right.
It works on so many things that block the actor. It's a great way to free. There's such freedom in it when you crack the code of it and leave yourself alone and not concern yourself with what's repetition and how does it work. And I got my teacher's voice in my ear telling me I'm doing it wrong. Once you let go of all that shit, it's very liberating and very freeing. But you and I have sort of vowed that our podcast would not be us against other techniques, and it's certainly not us against other Meisner practitioners, right? People take this shit so seriously. You go, Meisner versus Strasberg, and they get all serious about it. I'm like, dude, it's acting. Take it easy.
Yeah, it's whatever works for you,
Whatever works for you, but people will die. No, the only way to act is the method. No, it's the Meisner technique. And then somebody steps forward. What about Michael Checo? You go, what are you guys doing? It all meets in the middle somewhere. The truth is the truth is the truth. Because everybody wants to get to it. So we're just saying that the Meisner technique works for us. But by the way, we use a shit ton of Michael Chekhov in our work. We use viewpoints in our work. Our fundamental in sort of moment-to-moment realism, cause and effect realism acting is Meisner.
Sure.
But not the only. And we're not here to say this is the only way to do it. I'm sure, by the way, when I demonstrate repetition next time, there will be people who will be like, that's not the way to do it. That's wrong. I'm like, maybe. I don't give a shit if it's right or wrong. I just know that when we do it, it works. Somebody could say, I studied directly with Sandy, and that's not how he did it. And I might go, well, we don't have dinosaurs on the planet anymore either. You know, they also once ruled the world. There's a lot of things that were done away that aren't done that way anymore. But as long as we're not butchering it, as long as we understand fundamentally why it works, then that's great. That's fine. If it works for you, that's great. So, but I like you saying that having said what I just said, there are people who claim they're doing Meisner, and it's not real. I had a guy tell me once, I'm very good at repetition. I win every time.
I win.
I was like, I'm sorry, what? How do you win at repetition? So they had some idea that it was a game to play that you can win or lose. Now, in fairness, Meisner himself called it the repetition game, which I sort of hate because I call it the repetition exercise, but he invented it and he called it a game. So that is fine with me. But somebody took it to mean like there's some rules to it and you can win or lose. And I will say this, Carson and I are aware of a very, very famous actor who is one of the greatest actors of our generation who demonstrated repetition. And he and I, Carson and I, looked at each other like, what? That is not anywhere near Meisner's repetition exercise. But this actor, who you all have heard of and is a great, great actor, said, I'm going to do an exercise with you. Now it's called the repetition exercise. And then the way he did it was the furthest thing. It was, in fact, kind of the opposite of Meisner's theory behind repetition. So we were just like, wow. Yeah. It's out there somehow and people are misinterpreting or misunderstanding or something.
Right.
Okay. That's it for us. Thank you all for listening. Next time, we will have a demonstration of everything we just talked about today.
There you go.
There you go. As Carson would say, toodles.
Toodles. Make sure to follow us on Instagram @Meisner Podcast.